and I think that might be us live. So I'm just gonna wait. This is going through Zoom because I'm having a guest, Kevin, on today. But it is fantastic to have you all here. And today, what we are going to talk about is the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And I'm really excited because everything that we've done in the first 3 days has led us to this point where now we get to talk about the real stuff, the real where the rubber hits the road in terms of how you feel, how you do you, which is basically why you've all probably done this challenge. And we're going to give you a model. I call this the matrix of life. Some people call it all types of things, CTFAR. But I really want to help you understand how how to do this. So we'll just wait for a few more people to come on and we will get going very, very shortly. Welcome everybody, welcome everybody. I hope that this is working because I'm using Zoom, so hopefully there's no glitches. Hopefully this goes smoothly. So I'm just going to run through the model, then I'm going to call Kevin in and we will have a discussion about all this good stuff. So how are you enjoying the challenge so far? I'd love to hear some feedback about how the challenge has been for you. Has it been useful? Is it kind of boring? Do you not really know where it's going? Any feedback would be fantastic. Drop it below. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about this idea of the matrix of life, the CTFAR model, which is in the workbook. So I would love you to just zoom into that model, the blue diagram that I've put in there. Um, and this will help you understand your emotional world. It'll help you solve most problems in your life if you really internalize it. I really want you to singe it into your brain and make it really the thing that you go to when you try to solve emotional problems, thought-based problems, problems to do with inactivity, any actions you're taking, or if there's a results that you're getting in your life that you don't like. This model will help you understand where you need to go backwards, forwards. I'll show you how to use this. It became apparent after doing this work after about 2 or 3 years that people struggle with their frame and how they view the world. And you'll see in that model that I've broken it down into circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, and results. And usually the place where most people go wrong is the gap between C and T. So the interpretations and beliefs that they have about the world is where we get emotional challenges. We sometimes unfortunately believe that we can control the world, and that causes us lots of emotional difficulties. We can't control the world. At the moment, I think we're being confronted with lots of challenges around how we want to be able to control the world, and some people are trying to fight the battle to be able to control the world and the circumstances, and that is changing how they are emotionally showing up in the world. And what I want to offer everybody is that that is a choice. It is related to how our brain is working on it, and we can choose to react in whatever way we want to that, and we can feel however we want to feel about that. Our internal freedom is only slightly related to the external freedom. The external world, his what was his name? Man's Search for Freedom. Viktor Frankl wrote about this. The people who survived concentration camps were the ones who painted a bigger picture for themselves, for their future. So if you're painting a horror story for you and your future, I want to help you with the tools now to create your sense of creating your emotional reality with how you are thinking about it. So this takes practice. This takes many, many models to practice to get good at this. So you're not going to get it perfect first time, and that's okay. That is absolutely fine. You need to write out a lot of times different models about how you are thinking and framing things in your mind. Any emotional challenge, you need to keep doing it and practicing it to understand how you are how your thoughts are creating the results that you experience in your world. So let's go through what I actually mean. Um, all of our feelings basically are a result of the sentences and the word structures and how we frame the narrative of our life in our brain. That's basically where your emotions come from. Our thoughts create our emotions, and our thoughts are triggered by how we interpret the circumstances of the world. All the circumstances in the world that we find ourselves in are totally neutral until our human brain looks at it and processes it in our own way, wrapping our model and our frame of the world around it. So the model starts with the top line being circumstances. As I mentioned, the world is basically fact based, it's neutral. There is just an isness about the world, the universe. We find ourselves applying our own judgments to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And that's where we get in trouble, because we don't have any control over the isness of reality. So that's a lot of the time where you need to look at where am I giving my power away to just the facts of reality. Other people sometimes we try to control, and we can't control other people. We might be able to influence other people, but we get frustrated when we can't control other people. So that's where I would encourage you to look at. Are you trying to control people, circumstances in your life? And are you giving your power away to those circumstances in your life? Because that could be where you are losing energy, like we talked about yesterday. So I would urge you to bin that. If you have a rule that says you try to control other people, it's not going to serve you. The past that you've experienced, that is a circumstance of your life now. You can't change or control what has happened and what's gone before. Other people's behavior is a circumstance as well. So if other people's behavior is triggering thoughts within you and it's creating emotions within you, that could be because you believe that you can control their behavior. People are free to be themselves, and that is something that we should embrace, because then we're taking control back of our emotional mechanics. If we're giving away and expecting people to work the way we want them into the world, that's not going to work for us. So anything outside of us, in the outside world, which we've no control over, that's what you should consider as a circumstance, the top line. So then we have thoughts. We'll get down to T now. Thoughts that we have. These are the conclusions that we come to, the beliefs that we have about our circumstances that we find ourselves in. And this is probably the place where we get in trouble with our emotions, because a lot of us believe that our thoughts and the circumstances that we have in our lives are actually hard facts about the world. They're not. They're different. Our thoughts are just interpretations that our brain makes about the world based on beliefs and experiences, learnings, inherited beliefs from other people. All these thoughts are optional. This is the only place where we have choice in the whole model, is our thoughts. And that's why the brain is incredibly important in this. How we apply our interpretation mechanism in the world is so important that we get a hold of understanding what our interpretation. Some people think in terms of the fact that they are a victim of their circumstances, and that totally gives their power away in terms of what they can do and how they feel in the world. And that's usually what I help my clients with, understanding where they're giving their power away, where they view themselves as a victim. And what I try to help people do is to become the creator of their reality rather than the victim of the circumstances, because we can be the creator if we just change a few little things around in our interpretations that we make. So what do I want to say? Yeah, so thoughts all come from the beliefs that we have in our mind, and the belief will then correspond to how I feel. So if I believe something about myself, I will then create a feeling in my body, and usually that's related to the circumstance that I face. Usually the feelings that we like to feel, or usually the feelings that we don't like to feel, are coming from beliefs where we've given our power away, where we've made some interpretation or added an adjective to the world, like saying this is a bad thing. Anywhere you see where we're looking at the circumstance of what is going on and we're judging it in a negative, we're definitely prescribing a negative experience in terms of the body reaction that we create. So I already hear a lot of you saying, but Rob, I'm trapped inside now and I can't get out. Do you expect me to feel happy about this? And what I would offer in terms of that is to think about where you're putting your focus and how much you're applying your focus to things outside of your control. Because usually it's things that are way outside of your control where you are applying your focus. And because you're focusing solely on those things where you cannot control, you're powerless and you feel powerless. And there's a sense of being a victim that comes from that. So that's what I would think about. The circumstances are always neutral, and we're all at liberty to apply whatever meaning we want. But if we don't become aware of the meaning that we are applying, in a sense, we are floating along without ever having a sense of choice in our lives and owning the direction that we're going in. And Kevin's going to come on and talk a little bit about this later. Bliss and joy are always available feelings to us if we have thoughts that we're thinking in our minds that enable us to feel bliss and joy. And we all do have those options. So, as I said, the thoughts create our feelings. So this is where we put, usually the matrix is useful because people will come and they'll say, okay, I'm feeling a certain way. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And what I usually do is I say, well, what is creating that feeling? And usually people will say, you know, I'm kind of, I'm angry because this thing happened to me. Usually there's one sentence that will describe what it is that people feel. And when we're feeling these like sad, angry, fearful, anxious, all these feelings that disempower us, usually the line underneath is the actions. Usually when we're feeling those things, we're not going to take really proactive actions in the world that we want to be taking, that are going to move us towards what it is that is, you know, congruent, confident sense of where we're going deliberately in the world. So our feelings are created by the thoughts that we entertain in our minds, and the actions that we take in the world are caused by those feelings. So if you find yourself you know, behaving a certain way in the world, it's always coming from how you feel. So if you feel anxious, you're going to be in on yourself, not really proactively following what it is your passion project, because you're feeling anxious and fearful about the future. So you're way in the future, you're not in the present. And the idea is to come back into the present and go, okay, what am I thinking about? What am I focusing on right now? How can I empower myself to feel how I need to feel, to take the actions that I want to be taking that are going to get me the results that I want in my life? And we need to think about these things. You know, how do I want to be acting is related to what do I need to feel to get me into that action state. And on top of that is, what do I need to think to be in that feeling to get me into that action state that are going to get me the results that I want in the world? And consistently applying certain actions and behaviors over time is what creates the results that we get in the world. So that's why this whole matrix is really important. That kind of explains it a as a model to use. Now, what I would recommend is to think for yourself, where am I aware of something problematic in my life at the moment? Maybe it's a feeling, maybe it's a thought that you're having, and that thought probably creates a feeling that you don't like. And put it onto the model. You'll see at the end of day 4, I've created a current situation and a future situation. What I would what I would recommend that you do is that you map onto the current situation how it currently works. So what's the feeling that you feel, and above that, write what it is the sentence that you're focusing on that creates that feeling. And then ask yourself, what's the actual situation? What is the circumstance in my life that makes me focus on that thought? And remember, circumstances are neutral, so if you're adding adjectives into the circumstance, you're doing it wrong. And then when you look at that and you think about it, what is the feeling creating in terms of action? And it might be inaction as well that you put onto the A line. And then out of that, what are all those inactions or those specific actions resulting in your life? So that's basically the model. That's what I want to help you understand. And why this is important is because the stories that you're telling yourself are creating the results that you have in your life. So if you want a different result in your future, you need to entertain new thoughts. You need to entertain empowering thoughts. Thoughts where you become the creator of your feeling states, which allow you to act in accordance with where you want to go, with the results that you want to create in your life. And that basically is it. If you have any questions about this, I know it might be a little bit challenging to understand at the start, but give it a go. Map your own, and I would encourage you to do lots of models because you're going to have lots of different feelings and they're caused by different thoughts. And there might be different actions that you're taking now that are maybe sabotaging you. But you need to understand what the thoughts are, because the thoughts are where you is the only place where you can control and the only place that you can change. And you might think, yeah, but how can I change these thoughts? These are true. I believe these. You can change your beliefs. And that's what I would encourage you to think about. And I'm going to open up an amount of people to be able to book a call with me after this whole challenge is over, and that's what we can work through for you if you've got something very specific on and you don't see any way that you can believe something or reformulate your thoughts in a certain way. There is. Rest assured that there always is. Nothing is set in stone. You don't have to believe anything in the world, so you can always change your mind about those things. If you have any questions, I would be eager to hear those below. I am going to invite our friend Kevin to come into the room and we will have a little chat. So I've invited him in. He should be in any moment. Kevin Flanagan, how are you?
Hi,
How are you keeping?
I'm keeping good, man. How are you?
I'm
Loving this masterclass that you're doing.
Yeah, it's the penultimate day, and I kept the special sauce for the end for the people. So Kevin is
What's the segment now, sir?
you are the special sauce. Kevin is a coaching consultant. He's also the European programs director with Students for Liberty, and Kevin is a very special dude in terms of how he thinks. In terms of Kevin, tell the people about your master's thesis and how you understand words and
Mhm.
magic, and like I think all that stuff is fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll try not to go into too much detail on this part in particular, but for me, and I love listening to what you were saying a few minutes ago, I love this approach to the understanding of language. Language is very, very powerful. It's one of the most powerful tools that we have. Without language, we wouldn't have civilization. Without language, we wouldn't have order. We wouldn't have justice. We wouldn't have even ways to express love and identity. And so, very much my interest in language is how language is used to create reality. Obviously there's a physical reality, there is an objective reality, but how we describe that and how we cloak it in language is what humanizes it and makes it our reality. So in that sense, the words that we use, that we choose to use to describe the things in our reality, are the things that actually give it definition and give it purpose. So my master's thesis in politics, philosophy, and economics was to analyze the very institutions that we, make up our society, make up the state, the justice system. I focused on the monetary system, and my basic contention is that this is imaginary. The whole monetary system and all man-made institutions are essentially imaginary, that
Mm.
are created through the use of words, which are simply symbols, and through repetitive practice, which is a ritual. Okay, so our whole society is built around rituals and language. So if this is the case, and I could go deeper into that on a different topic, but we're talking about individuals here. So in the same way that you can understand that reality is built by words, then our sense of who we are as an individual is built by words. So many years ago, my journey on this was that I was a bit of a weird child. I was interested in kind of unusual topics, and the nature of who I was as an individual was something that became really important to me in my teenage years, because they weren't easy. They weren't easy teenage years. So, thinking about the nature of reality, what is the point of all of this? Is it worth it? That sent me on a journey then, when I went to look at ancient texts from the Vedas on Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, and texts about self realization and things like this. And this is how I started to build the kind of worldview that I have now, which also ties into this notion of magic and the spoken word. I mean, in the Bible, I think it's the first line. In the beginning was the Word, okay, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. It was the Word, okay, and it's like that's the act of creation. Okay, we can flesh this out a little bit as we go a little bit deeper here, but just to rewind a little bit, one of the questions that I asked myself in a very profound way when I was maybe 19 years of age was, what am I?
Mm.
Most people asking, who am I? Who am I, and what way should I act in the world, and what character do I play? How can I be a good partner or a son, or how should I interact with my teachers and my employers and so on? And this, how this kind of defines me. What do I like? What football team do I support? What music gets my foot tapping? This is all kind of who am I? But then let's go even deeper, guys. What are we? We don't know. Let's be honest. We don't know. And this is something that's really exciting, because then we can start to really, in the same way that Descartes and other great philosophers have asked this question, what am I? And he came to the conclusion, I think, therefore I am. So
Mm.
the reason I'm mentioning this is just to give people kind of throw a bucket of water over your head right now, and just like take a step back and appreciate the fact that we know very little about what we are. Okay. So this definition of the next question is then, well, what do I want to become? Who
Mm.
do I want to be? How do I want to show up in the world? And in doing so, what we are actually doing is we're asking the same question I want to create. Because in my transformation, because I perceive the world through my senses and through my brain, if I transform myself, then the world transforms with me. And how I, using your model that you were talking about a few moments ago, how I change my view and how I think and feel about the world is actually having an effect on changing the world.
Mm.
If I was previously afraid of something and I overcame that fear, then I no longer have that fear, right? So my world changes in that degree by which my language changes, in the degree by which my belief and the words that I use
Yeah.
to describe myself, the stories that I tell myself about
Yeah.
myself change, then the world also changes. So feel free to jump in at any point, but I'll just keep going if you let me.
Well, yeah, just keep going in terms of like the whole idea is like people are thinking about their mastery mission on this challenge. So,
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
terms of that, the hero's journey that we want people to go on, can you speak
Mhm.
can you speak to how people
Yeah.
might be at the moment feeling disempowered and how they can change that into something more empowering.
For sure, for sure. So like storytelling is an amazingly powerful tool. It's part of everything that we do. Like all the movies that we watch, all those Netflix series, it's all storytelling, okay? And we can become good storytellers when we meet with our friends and we tell them what's going on with our lives in the pandemic. We're telling a story, right? If we're talking about something that happened to us in our childhood, we're telling a story. If we're trying to sell a new product or get new clients, we're telling stories. So storytelling as an external tool is incredibly powerful, but also in the internal tool, your own story,
Mm,
okay, your saga, the hero's journey. As soon as we're born, we have this like absolute potential and innocence, okay, and the absolute dependency, right? We can't even think, we don't even know where we are, we have to be taken care of. But as soon as that moment of birth happens, that we begin to have stories layered on top of us. Our name, like maybe you're going to end up supporting the same football team as your dad, or having the same political interests as your grandmother, or something like that. We start to kind of um, borrow storylines
mm,
from the people around us, and this is what we begin to think of as me, as I. Okay, so if you're a kid and you're told things like you're stupid, you're never going to amount to that, or you're not really good at that thing, you're good
mm.
at that other thing, or I didn't know you liked that, I
It's so
thought you
common.
liked this. It's so common because our world is built around stories, and then if you start to behave in a way that is different from the story that somebody has in their head, they pull you up on it. They
Mm,
say, well, that's not really your thing. Like you, oh, this is terrible in Ireland. People love, like,
yeah,
you should know your place. Don't get too big for your boots. Don't think you're so great,
yeah,
right? You think you're so great. There's nothing so great about you. These are actually magic spells, my
yeah.
friends. This is magic spells. You must, because the creation comes from the word, okay? And what you speak, we have to be responsible for our thoughts and our words just as much as our actions,
Hmm.
okay? So when we have these spells that are put on us, and maybe you start to believe those things about yourself. Maybe you start to believe that, oh well, maybe I am good enough, maybe I won't go for that promotion, or maybe I won't approach that girl who I'm really I'm attracted to, but I'm afraid because I'm not good enough for
Mm,
her. Like, these are again just stories that you're telling yourself about yourself. But if not you, who is going to become the best version of yourself?
hmm.
Who is going to become the best version of you if not you? Okay, and one of the steps that we can do to start addressing this, and that's why what you're talking about right now is so important, is kind of rewiring the storyline, rewriting the script, because we can't change the past, but we can change how we feel about the past, and that's how you
Yeah,
rewrite the script, and that's how you stop being the actor on the stage and you start to become a co-director, a creator, as you mentioned. What sort of world am I going to create? These are the questions, and we have the power to be passive participants in the world or active players. Okay, and this is so exciting. This is where the real, you know, energy is. This is where the real power is. Okay, because freedom exists at the moment between stimulus and
hmm,
response. Something happens to you on the outside world, you're stimulated, you read a news story, somebody says something to you, whatever it is, you name it, then you have response. The moment in between those two instances is your freedom, and that's where you dwell. That's where
yes,
the individual dwells, at the moment between freedom, stimulus, and response. So even though if you have these bad, experiences from your past, or even in the present situation, your freedom lies in how you decide to respond to that. One of the things for me that was a real kind of motivator was, and I don't want to get too grim here, but it's very valuable to contemplate your own death.
oh yeah,
When you look at any greats throughout history, like great philosophers or artists and so on, they will talk about the theme of death, and the theme of death is usually quite close to them, because to have the death as a constant reminder will make you live more fully today. To realize that we are going to die. This is temporary. It's impermanent. Okay, you're definitely going to die. So what are you going to do about that?
yeah,
If you realize how temporal life is, then a lot of the obstacles that are holding you back, you realize are just mental obstacles in the first place, that they're your own obstacles. And Like nobody else is going to live a great life on your behalf. That's something that you need to take for yourself. So, what does it mean to be the hero's journey or to be the hero in your own saga? It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go off and get into politics and become a great world-renowned leader or become the top of your field or to have books written about you for centuries to come. That's not what it means, but it means living a life of authenticity,
Mm.
living a life where you face the adversity, you face the challenges that come along with this sort of sense of self, that your sense of self is intact because you've done that work and you've gotten to know what yourself is. It's not the stories that people told you about yourself. It's not the stories that you tell yourself about yourself from the past. It's like the realizing it in the terms of self-realization, enlightenment, higher consciousness, realizing that you are an active spark of creation, that you have a limited amount of willpower, you have a limited amount that you can affect this world, and then
Yes.
actually doing that. So I'll just tell a quick story about the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and how that can change. So when I was in high school, which was a long time ago now, uh,
Not so
but
long.
I can still remember when it was like what, God, 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago,
It's only a wet day ago.
18 years ago, or something like that. Um, anyway, we get our final exam, the big exam, and this is going to determine where you're going to go for the rest of your life. This is what they told us in school. If you don't do well in this exam, you're going to have a terrible job. You're going to have a terrible life. Everything's over for you.
Yeah,
They put all
God.
this pressure on young people to. I know you remember. So my friend got a lot of points in his leaving cert. He got a lot more points than I did. He did a lot better. I was like a little above average, like a C plus student, and he came out with like 550 points out of 600. And I was like, whoa, what are you gonna do with that? What you've got all these points, you can do anything you want now. And he said, well, I'm gonna go study law. And I can still remember as I think about the memory now, this was a long time ago, but it's a very clear, strong memory. I can still remember how I felt at that moment when my heart sank and I said to myself inside my head, I would never be able to do that. Wow, law, whoa, I could never do that. Jeez. And that was a story that I told myself about myself. And at the time, I believed it. For years, that's when I went on a very deep journey of self discovery, which we haven't got time to get into now. But part of that journey took me to India. It took me to, as I said, studying ancient texts, learning about self realization, psychology, magic, mysticism, and so on. And it started to change my identity of who I am. When I was traveling through India by myself with no friends, no family, nobody who knew me, no longer was I fulfilling these different characters, these different costumes that I had in life, where I was playing the lad with my friends and speaking to my grandmother a different way than I would speak to my brother. Okay, I started to realize because all of a sudden there you are, you're there, and it's like I didn't have any plans what I was supposed to do. When I woke up in the morning, I was just there by myself with my choices in front of me. And that was a big kind of eye opener to realize that hold on a second, I am the master of my own destiny. I
Mm.
am the hero of my story. I'm writing the script. I'm the one who's going to make sure that this is a book that people want to read after I go. And to fast forward then a couple of years, I did eventually go back and study law, and I turned out to be very, very good at it, finishing top of my class in my penultimate year. What was the difference there? I'm still the same
Yeah.
person, okay? The only difference is I had more life experience, and that life experience had taught me to how to see myself differently, how to view myself in an empowering way, to trust that I am the master of my own destiny. And only when those stories were changed did my world change.
Exactly. Exactly. One thing that I've always recognized in you, like we know each other for over 10 years now, and one thing I've always recognized within you is you've always been a really good public speaker, and you help people with their own public speaking techniques. I wonder if, because this is one of the biggest fears that people have, it's coming out and speaking in a bigger forum or in a bigger way to the world. I wonder if you could speak on some of the, because I'm sure a lot of people have fears around that are joining us today, around just being bigger to
Mm.
themselves. But can you speak to some of the common pitfalls and, you know, thought processes that people get stuck in, and which keeps them in a
Yeah.
disempowered state?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be like super blunt and simple with this, but basically, um, I'd say 99% of the time, if not 100% of the time, people are in their own way, and they're building themselves up in their own head that it's actually their ego that's letting them down, and they think people give a shit as much as they think people really care if they make a mistake on stage. Like they're so
Yeah,
important, and this is a kind of a you know psychological sort of defense mechanism that we have, right? But actually, the main message is get over yourself. Like that's blunt and that's straight to the point. Now, when I do my public speaking workshops, it's a lot more in depth and a lot more gentle than that. But you're getting basically to the point of like, get over yourself. Come on, you have something to say, then say it. Like when you're a kid, you look at kids, right? Little like 3 or 4 or 5 year olds. They will not stop until they get your attention. They're like, Rob, 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 look what I have. And
yeah,
they just want to talk. They just want people to pay attention to them. Then something happens. We go to high school. That's the worst place for these bad stories
mm,
that become complexes because the hierarchy in the school, you get put into a certain group and people treat you a certain way, and you might like you might be into something. Maybe you're into some computer game or some band, okay? And you come into school and say, I like this band. And everyone's like, oh, that band is shit. Do you know he likes that band? And this is where the
yeah,
real, like, and that's where we start to become quiet and say, okay, I'm not going to speak out because people are mean. Right, but kids, they're better. Like they're like stronger. They don't care about your judgment. Your
mm,
judgment is irrelevant to them. And partly part of this process of empowerment is to get into that place where the thing that matters most to you is your judgment of yourself.
yeah,
And I've given public talks where afterwards I wasn't happy. People said that was a great talk, but I wasn't happy with how it went. Right, and I'm totally okay with that because that's how I can grow and improve. Um, but if I'm delivering my speech in a way that I think that you want to hear it, that I'm only saying the things that I think this person wants to hear, then I'm not giving you anything. I'm just stealing your time. It's living my life in half. A life in fear is a life half lived. Um, you're stealing from your audience. And so the other thing I would say to people is it's really easy to be yourself. When are you not being yourself?
yeah,
So when we get up on the stage and we have this sort of like packaged plastic version of ourselves that we think people want to see, and then we get up and we try and sell that. If you don't have a great product, people are going to see it's plastic, right? But if you get up authentically and vulnerably,
mm,
this is one thing I learned, and this is probably one message lesson for anybody who's interested in this. Your vulnerability is your strength.
absolutely.
Your vulnerability is your strength. And things about my past that you know about, I guess, that I would have felt uncomfortable to speak about on stage for a long time because it was just stories, the stories that I told myself about my past and how people would judge me and how people might use those experiences against me. When I had the courage to own those experiences and say, "This is me. This is part of me. This is the storyline. This is how the person who you see get before you today. It was a long journey to get here, and it was a hard journey. And now I own that, and it's part of me, and nobody can use it as a weapon against me. So it was a complete irrational fear in the first place that people could use your kind of vulnerabilities against you. There's another thing I want to point out
Yeah,
similar in the similar kind of area as this is a thing called the Jonah complex. And the Jonah complex is a thing in psychology. You can Google it, look it up. It's a fear of your own greatness. It's a fear of your own success. And to use an analogy, that's mankind is somewhere in between worms and gods. Okay, but it's more. A lot of us find that it's more comfortable to accept our what's the word, like mundanity, accept like our um, uh,
Mediocrity,
plainness,
right?
our mediocrity, our plainness, um, rather than accept our greatness because it's scary.
Yeah,
It's fucking scary to accept
too
your
right.
greatness because you know how powerful you
Yeah.
are. You know how powerful you are, and we kind of, and as also in that process of becoming yourself, you become increasingly independent, and you start to depend on other people's opinions less, but also on their guidance and their direction. And this is scary for people as well because as you increasingly become yourself and get more in touch with that deeper like self-realization, um, you kind of have no one to blame but yourself. You
Yeah.
start to take you start to take ultimate responsibility for your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. Okay, and your progress in your life. And so, in a sense, that this journey, which we would used to call the journey to becoming sovereign human being, like I said, when you're born and they start putting these stories on you,
Mm,
let's start taking the stories off. These things that are not me, they might describe me a little bit or parts of my personality, but it's not me.
mm,
Starts taking these off, and that starts to get scary because you're making yourself naked in front of the universe. Okay, and we wear these clothes, these layers, as forms of protection, as a sort of a psychic, spiritual defense against other egos.
mm-hmm.
You know, our ego is a defense mechanism against other egos, and we play these acts. And I think for me personally, one of the qualities that I find it most difficult to be okay with in other people is is inauthenticity when I feel they're acting when they talk to
Yeah.
me, that they're behaving in a way that they think and I mean I have a position in an organization that sometimes you get people like that, you know, people kind of licking up to your position and stuff, and it just makes me cringe because if I'm not wearing a mask, I don't want to talk to your mask.
Yeah.
Either I put my mask back on and you don't see me, or you also take your mask off. And one of the, I think, best compliments I've gotten over the years, and it's happened many times, is people say to me, I feel most myself when I'm with you.
Yeah. That's
And that's
beautiful.
part of how I've ended up on this path. Similarly to you, it's like wanting to help people, but not because there's something like it's in it what's in it for me in that sense,
Mm,
but just uh, one it's when I if you really push me, the reason why I've done this for years, not just with coaching, but freedom activism, it's because I want to live in a better world, right? So there is like there's that element of selfishness there in the back of the mission, but the, okay, let me rephrase it differently. The thing that I'm saddest about in the world, the thing that upsets me the most, is we have 7 billion people, and so many of them don't even know they're alive.
mm, yeah.
They don't even know they're alive. And so, what is it to be alive? And this is why contemplating your death is really important. And I looked, I kind of think of it that when I die, or when I die, that my life has some sort of imprint, you know, like that. It meant something. It was like, you know, it was colorful. It illuminated the lives of other people. It made a difference,
Mm,
you know, it made a difference. Even if it's on a small scale, you know. Um, and when I die, it's only my own standard that I'm holding myself to. It's not your standard of me. It's not, I want to be satisfied
yeah.
at the end. I want to be able to roll over and feel satisfied. We were talking about this before. It's like, you know, you have a really good shag, right? Great shag. And then what do you do if it's a great one? You just kind of like, you fall over, completely satisfied, fall asleep with a big smile on your face and go off to the land of dreams. Well, I kind of want life, the end of life, to be like that. That when it's done, I just kind of fall over, exhausted but satisfied and pleased at the choices I've made, pleased at who I had, how I had lived the life,
Yeah.
and then to just breathe out my last breath, but to be happy,
Mm,
content. I think it's. I can't imagine how many people who breathe out those last breaths with feeling of anxiety or regret, or you know, or how I would have done things differently.
yeah.
You know.
Exactly.
Um, so the last story I'll say, because I told you if you let me go, I'll keep going.
That's
The last
beautiful. I love
one,
it.
the last story that I'll say is like back to India. So a kind of a lesson that I learned at that time in my life when I was going through this period of getting to know myself and discovering who I was and discovering what did I want the world to be and how was I going to play a part in my mission. I remember reading this quote from Gandhi that most people will know: "You must be the change that you want to see in the world." Right? And when I read that as a young man, I got it. I thought it was a really cool quote. It made sense. It was very simple, but I felt completely overwhelmed by this, and it disempowered me because the change that I wanted to see in the world was huge. I didn't want to see homeless people on the streets. I
Mm.
didn't want to see people getting raped in war-torn countries. I don't want to see, dictators like killing their people, and I didn't want to see all this stuff in the world. But what the hell could I do, Gandhi? What's your advice to what's your advice now, Gandhi? To say be the change you want to see in the world. I can't do that. I don't have the resources, and that's partly part of stepping into your power is also accepting your limitation.
Mm.
It's being humble enough to accept I can't fix that problem. So I started to meditate on this idea of being the change you want to see in the world, and when I started to think of the world, none of us can actually, there are like 7 billion different worlds. There's one for every different human being
Mhm.
because the world is an interpretation through our mind, through the stories, everything we've been talking about here earlier on. So it's my world, okay? Be the change you want to see, and I want to see in my world. What is my world? Well, my world is the five senses, the things that actually come into my field of experience on a daily basis. The places I go, the people I meet, the way that I talk to them, the actions that I take. And then all of a sudden, this burden became manageable. I didn't have to go and fix all the big problems in the world. I just had to sweep my own doorstep.
Mm.
There's a saying in India as well: if everyone sweeps their doorstep, their own doorstep, the whole world would be clean.
Clean, yeah.
So this is a very long roundabout way of answering the question about like what advice would I give people if they're doing public speaking, or how do they like kind of hack the obstacles that are in their brain? Well, the first one is to contemplate your death and realize that time is of the essence. Time is of the essence. Second, you do have responsibility for changing the world, but it's your world, it's your bodily kingdom, it's your interactions, relationships,
Yeah.
decisions, path. That's totally your responsibility. You do have the opportunity to be either a creator or a passive observer in this world, and either there's no moral right or wrong choice in this, but there is a definite consequence to either one of those in terms of the sort of satisfaction uh, that you can have in your life. And the last thing I say, I know I said that a couple of times, but the last thing, if not you, then who? If not you, then who? I'm not going to be the hero of Rob's life. Rob's not going to be the hero of my life.
Yeah.
You must be the hero of your own life. Now, the good news is greatness is not a finite resource. It's
Yeah.
absolutely abundant. There's no limit to the pool of greatness that you can tap into, but you must tap into it.
Exactly. You must meet the best vision of yourself within yourself first and be led by that and grow your relationship with that. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Kev, thank you so much for coming on today. Love you, man. You're amazing. So that is it. Where does that leave you, my beautiful challengers of mastery mapping? Where in this whole journey is it that you find yourself? Are you seeing where it is that you're going? Are you telling yourself empowering stories? Are you telling yourself disempowering stories? These are important questions to ask yourself. This has been day 4. I hope this has been useful. I really invite you guys to go into the workbook and do the models. Use the matrix to look at what is alive for you and look at your current situation. How are you thinking about it? And think about what you want to be thinking about instead. And what are the results that you actually want instead? What do you need to How do you need to act? What behaviors do you need to exhibit in the world? How do you need to feel to get yourself into those action states? And what are the thoughts that you need to think? That's the only place we can control. It's what we allow into our minds and what we focus on. So I hope that that was useful. We've gone on for 50 minutes today. I really think I don't want this to go over an hour. Maybe if you have some questions, what came up for everybody, we can go through some questions for maybe 5-10 minutes. Otherwise, I would love you to throw your questions in to the thread and we will get to them later. I don't see any questions, so maybe if there are no questions, we can leave it there. Anybody got any questions? Anybody got any ponderings? Was this useful? Was it boring? It's hardly boring. Mr. Flanagan is anything but boring. And you can find him. I've linked his page above. He writes some very interesting things, and he's just an overall fantastic human being. So I would say follow his work. I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to leave it there. If you do have any questions, throw them into the thread and we will get to it. Thank you so much. Tomorrow is the final day of this challenge. Congratulations for you all moving towards your own mastery. We're going to talk about your own purposeful mission, your own purposeful mastery mission tomorrow on the final day, and I'm going to help you think about what it is your mission to get the full sense of this whole challenge. We can put something together that you can work towards after this challenge, and I will be inviting people to sign up to a group program after this, so I'm going to explain what's involved in the group program, and I look forward to sharing that with you guys tomorrow. Thank you for taking your time today to come through, and we will talk to you all tomorrow. See you soon.